execution is a really big deal. If you ask CEOs what's top of mind, they almost always say it's execution. It's also a struggle. This is something companies aren't doing very well on. You would think this is something that we know a lot about. Like, why aren't we really focusing on this? There was a clear gap in the research, both the academic side, but more so the practical side, of helping companies better execute their strategy for results. That's actually why I started looking at this area, along with a research colleague and co-author. We've spent several years, maybe a bit too long, trying to develop this survey on how to measure a company's ability to execute its strategy. One of the nice things about doing this research here at the London Business School is we are one of the few schools that does dedicate an executive course just to executing strategy. Now we've surveyed over 350 organizations, which is close to 10,000 senior executives, leaders, and managers.
The aspects of the survey I found most useful was the feedback on what our key team thought about our strategy. And actually, what we thought our strategy wasn't necessarily what they thought it was.
So the survey was really useful because it partly validated what we sort of already sensed in the management team, but it showed the scoring and compared that against other companies. It actually was a fairly fundamental thing to be able to see how we compared and to see how it impacted other things that were causing us difficulty in executing the strategy that we had.
I'd say one of the biggest myths of execution is that it's all about building a culture of performance. Now, if you talk to senior executives or leaders, they're often very on this notion that it all comes down to performance. If you try too hard to build performance and just turbocharge this focus on performance, you can run into some real risks. And these risks can really hurt execution over the long run. And one of the biggest ones is that too much focus on performance can hurt this notion of coordination or teamwork, which is absolutely critical to execution, especially in complex organizations. In executing strategy, you're actually on a day-to-day basis making commitments or promises to people across the organization. And what we find, one of those perhaps most surprising or shocking findings, is that these commitments in any organization tend to work very well up and down. I promise something to my boss, he promises something to me. Those usually have some teeth. But these commitments or these promises made across the organization usually tends to be where things fall down.
I've been able to take back to our organisation much more effective ways of us working together collaboratively. We've been able to set up more formal structures around achieving our results and recognise where our limitations have been in the past of executing strategy.
One of the things that we did throughout this research was build a model of, if I were a senior executive trying to think about how my company can better execute strategy, what are the key drivers that I need to think about? It's going to be different ones at different points in time. And managers have really found that useful because you can look at this big beast, which is execution, and not know where to start.
The key model I took away from the course was the must-win battle framework. And that's a way of prioritising the key drivers behind what's going to significantly transform the business over the coming years. And we held a series of workshops for us to all have input as to what those areas would be.
Execution's not just about implementing a plan. Having that framework, again, knowing where to start, I think is one of the biggest things we can offer for companies or for executives themselves. It's about being able to come down and say, here are the 2 or 3 things that if I just focus on those, it could make a real difference.